Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for Mayor of Abbotsford to bring the RCMP in. Today, I thought I'd switch up and do a different podcast for you today on what brought me to the world stage and why. A simple mistake done, covered up in the name of fraud, collaborating and using a city official chair for you to gain. Henry Braun took the mayorship to control Abbotsford and then ward decision his way and his partner's ways. Henry loaded his family, Erwin Braun and his friends, to the police board, but Henry loaded his son Darren Braun to the city. It was Darren Braun that took me behind the scenes and showed me how his dad had the perfect plan. So let me tell you, I'm on the bottom of Discovery Trail and what I'm doing here. Imagine walking on Discovery Trail and finding a body, and you just keep walking. Do you not think you call the authorities in? Do you not think you call the press in and you try to solve what went wrong for this poor human being that was murdered or killed and dumped here on the bottom of Discovery Trail? That's what an ordinary human being would do. But when greed takes in, you dispose of his body and you head for the hills and you hope nobody finds it. What are I doing on the bottom of Discovery Trail? When Darren Braun showed me the elites that Henry had in the city, the majority of city councils that were not there for Abbotsford residents, but were weighing the decision his friends, except for Les Barkman, Mogil, Bruce Banman. Henry controlled most of the city councillors, giving them perks and blackjacking them in the corner. He showed me the establishment behind the city with Bobby Sparks, Marion Keys, the federal liberal, Mike DeJong, and how they were all working together. Henry was the mastermind of it all. The push you see of Ed Fast endorsing Mike DeJong behind his candidate's party is, we have to know what Ed Fast was hiding and why Ed's doing it. I believe that Ed Fast is pushing for Mike DeJong to cover up what Henry Braun was stealing out of the city in the corporation frauds. This, on the bottom of the Discovery Trail, is owned by Ron Funka, Diverse, and Pete Holmes. When Darren Braun showed me the multi-billionaire in Augustine, that his dad directly, he said, my dad directly slammed his ass down. Let me put it in Darren's words, slammed his ass down. My dad is going to control the properties, the sites that get developed, and his stuff's coming first with his friends. So if the billionaire in Augustine who said he could bring water and all these resources, Henry used the city councils that he controlled and figured the public would never call it out because he had Vicky Hopes and the Abbotsford newspaper in his pocket, 100% in his pocket. Knowing that his son was getting all the jobs through, Henry was lobbying directly for Ron Funk, knowing that he stood to gain. If you look at Ron Funk's jobs through Abbotsford, they've been all fastly ran and they've been decisioned. When I made that clear to the RCMP, I said, if I run, Henry will shit his drawers because he figures he's got it in the bag by loading Ross Siemens. It'll wreck his plan and he'll have to throw everything at me. That is how Henry paid off the attempted murder when he tried to kill me in broad daylight. That's how he got Ed Fast. These three men were owning this town like the New York mob. I went all this way with Abbotsford residents to give you your voice back, your city back, and forensic audits, and go after people like Ron Funka Diverse with no hesitation. It is how many elites are tied to Ron Funka Diverse. When I warned you that Henry Braun was shopping the Cacaro Ranch and told Ron Funk to buy it long before this was coming, he was going to use the newspaper. But they shut down the Augustine billionaire so their stuff would go through. He did the Abbotsford newspaper and many other sites. Henry was the engine knowing the official community plan, and he set it in his way, and he made it go his way with his partner's way with the city councils. So the question is now you know we do need the RCMP. Henry used the Abbotsford Police Chief Mike Sir to hold off investigations for collaborating hold off that his son was in front of him, there was no transparency, and hold off that he was using the city chair to enrich and aid himself in the hundreds of millions of dollars. How far was Mike DeYoung in the hole with Ed Fast? That is what we need the RCMP. How far did Henry Braun had Ed Fast over the barrel? That is what we need the RCMP. The push of Ed Fast behind Mike DeYoung, that solid liberal, and undermining Pierre Poilievre shows you that it's for what Henry stood and set up. Henry's wife and Ed Fast made it clear that Ed Fast would never go after Henry Braun, their best of friends. He would never call out that he was using the city chair to enrich and aid himself in Ron Funk of Diverse. Other newspapers and reporters asked me a few days ago, my gosh, how much money did Ken and Vicky Hopes get? I made it clear. Before Vicky Hopes came, Darren Brown showed me Rick Rakes was Henry's best friend. Rick Rakes' wife was Henry's best wife's friend. And Rick Rakes was ghostwriting stories for Tyler Olson to slam other candidates and slam Bruce Banman and slam everybody else and releasing it to Tyler. Then the Abbotsford News, Henry brought him on board to cover all this. The news should read that Henry's partners benefited over everybody else. And so let me tell you who has to go under this. There is no if, buts, or maybe. Ross Siemens was purposely loaded, and I was threatened and targeted because Henry needed Ross Siemens and the city councils to make sure, Ross, everything I put forward for the official community plan goes through. This is why we need the RCMP. Henry controlled and owned the whole of the Abbotsford Police. That's how he put him in front of my house, and he did this. I've never met Henry. I've never had coffee with Henry. I never had business deals with any of them. Till the negligence happened on our homes, and I knew by other municipality and other developers, this ain't supposed to be taking place. Your son ain't supposed to be in front of you. And council called Abbotsford first, Ross Siemens, Kelly Shahal, and them ain't supposed to be collaborating. We need to now go after the city councils that proved all Rob Funk stuff and all his projects, if you go through them. As this was going on, I've been watching the city meetings and understanding the city staff, and the city bureaucrats said, that's Ross, and the council were rushing all these jobs for Henry. They had a sworn duty as a public official to say Henry is beneficiating with his partners, he's fast-tracked all these jobs, and he was strong-arming. This is why Ed Fast, I believe, was kicked out of the Conservatives. The Conservatives figured, how much have you covered up for Henry Braun? Darren Braun was Henry's son, so there was no conspiracy when I went to the RCMP that it was hearsay. They knew when it came from the kid's mouth, it was 100% proof. We just have to let it play out. Ron Funk of Diverse is land, the newspaper site, the zoning changed, and he was allowed all them infraction because Henry controlled bylaw and he controlled the newspaper from it. He asked the Abbotsford police not to go down there and fraction anything. He controlled not imposing fines on Ron Funk, his partners, and everything. They changed the zoning to rush it. Then Ron Funk got the one behind by the hospital site and Ron Funk's job site. But Henry went in, designed official community plan with the city councils that he controlled. And Darren Brown showed me Ross Siemens is sitting at his gas station the full time as the city council. My dad's letting him not do any work, and now he owes him on every decision. So you go home, you get the city's paycheck, but when I need something, Ross, you pass that decision or else I'll call you out on it. It's called blackjacking. But this is fraud on Abbotsford taxpayers, and it led into threats. It was abuse by city chair for elite establishment. This is why I say we need the RCMP, and we need the Pierre Poilievre's party, the federal Conservatives, to call what Ed Fast owns and how he's tied, and open Ed's books and Mike DeYoung's books and Henry Braun's books. Rob Funk of Diverse has to go under full investigations by the RCMP, and his assets must be seized. It led into threats. Ron Funk of Diverse purposely knew, when he told me, he knew to run Ross Siemens, his staff did, to get Ross Siemens in, and they ran them candidates. If you were about this community, you would have put Les Barkman's sign on your property, and he didn't. He put Ross Siemens, who would give him the decision. He put Dave Sidhu He put Dave Lowens, he put Mark Warkentine, and Mark Warkentine knew this. This was Henry's partner. Mark Warkentine bought Ed's practice, and he's in Ed's old practice, corporation practice. He did Sandy Blue, and he did all these people that were with Henry Braun. He did not do any of the independents. He wouldn't let me run my sign, and I warned him that was illegal. But Darren Braun showed we need the RCMP. We have to go after these assets around Funkadiverse, and we have to seize it. This is just Vicky Hope's pumping a story. The question is, how many elites are in behind Ron Funkadiverse? The Augustine billionaire has to sue for unfairness and what happened to him. And they purposely shut him down so Henry could control the markets. This is why Henry Braun is in behind Brad Viss and Ed Fast endorsing Brad Viss. He doesn't need Brad Viss to call this out in his writing. This, Brad Viss is aware of, that Henry's partner Ron Funk owns it, and they were fast-tracking and in development. This calls for Pierre Poilievre, calls for the federal Liberals and the NDP, and it's calling on me as your mayor to call for the RCMP, bypass Henry's investigators and everything, and let's go after it and bring it in, because this is orchestrated threats, criminal act by the Abbotsford police, and also started threatening and blocking candidates in the election, and we need to go after them assets. Henry Braun, he told me if I go dead fast, it goes nowhere. Mike DeYoung said, you cut a deal with Henry, he owns Abbotsford. This is what they were after to develop right here for the Cacaro Ranch. And they were fast-tracking all these jobs for Henry Braun. And the city council were involved with it. And we have to go after them city councils and start investigating them, because this is why Ross Siemens is running around hiding. He got him in. Henry jacked him in, knowing that he could buy Ross, because Manji Soy wouldn't do it and I wouldn't do it. When Henry approached me with Greg Toes trying to bribe me, he knew I wasn't buyable, and he knew I would never allow this because it's orchestrated crime. We need the RCMP, and this is what we need. And you can see the Abbotsford police chief distancing himself and everything else, but it's massive investigations because it's corporation fraud. Ron Funkadiverse knew what he was doing, and he stood to benefit with Henry is his partner, and Henry lobbied all these jobs. Now, there's a difference, like David Eby said, between conspiracy and hearsay. But I want to let you know, Darren Braun, Henry's own son, showed the shit his dad was doing and abusing that city chair, but he also showed the dirty shit Ed Fast was doing, and Ed Fast was Henry's best friend, and what Mike DeYoung was doing. The question is, with the big push of Ed behind Mike, insulting his party and insulting the candidate, and even Brad Viss knowing that, why are you doing that to Suk Mangel, and I'm supposed to defend them? This is what they were after. This is what led to threats on Abbotsford residents. This is what led the Abbotsford Task Force constantly around me. This is what led to threats and blocks of the election for Ron Funkadiverse. But this is what sends you to prison for life. And that is what I will do for Abbotsford residents, no matter who's behind it and no matter who the players are or how big. What Henry Down did and where he went beyond the scope of law. He orchestrated in criminal activity, and Ed and Mike covered it up for this gain. And then you know, when somebody targets you at this level, it's always for money. Rob Funkadiverse has to and must be criminally charged. He stood to gain by his partner, Ross Siemens. You ain't gonna outrun it. You're never gonna outrun it, because Darren Braun will probably already cooperate with the big authorities behind everybody's back. And when the push comes and the squealing comes, this is what led to threats. If Henry Braun accomplished this with the Abbotsford police, you imagine how many other people are using the Abbotsford police to do this and cover this up in Abbotsford. I'm live, Abbotsford, British Columbia.